I'm honored to be here. Shauna is a wonderful example. I think you're definitely going to be missing out losing her. I know, though, that Sean Richards is a great guy as well, so I look forward to what he does. But thank you for inviting me to come do this. So there's probably a good chance, I don't know how many of you in this room may have already been or seen Ryan, my brother, speak. He's spoken at this. Has anyone seen him? Raise of hands. Just curious. Okay. I think he's actually done it a couple times. So first off, I apologize. I've been basically out sick for the last week with bronchitis. So if I'm hacking up a lung up here or I'm blowing my nose, I apologize. So I, for the most part, I'm mostly kind of the behind-the-scenes guy with a lot of the businesses that I've helped found and grow. I'm usually the tactical day-to-day guy that works on the back end. And so what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is some of those behind-the-scenes lessons, some of the important things that I've learned with a couple of the last adventures that I've gone through, and hopefully that gives you a different perspective on the back end of business. Before I go into that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So Isaac Westwood. I grew up here in Utah for the most part. I've lived in a couple other places. I've lived abroad in London. I've lived in Texas. I've lived in Washington. I grew up in Philadelphia. But really for the most part, I consider Utah my home. So when anyone asks, it's Utah. I love it here. I think that it's got, sometimes it gets a really bad kick. A lot of people have an opinion of Utah, but if you guys keep up with, especially with startups and with the tech industry, you'll see an article in Inc. or in Business Insider or Forbes, basically every couple quarters talking about how amazing Utah is for a business culture. So for you guys at this time in this location, it's actually an amazing opportunity to start and grow your own business. I'm married and have been 6 years. I've got 11-month-old boy, Elliot, who keeps me on my toes and takes away some of the hours that I used to have, little that I did have though. I also graduated from UVU, and the interesting thing is I graduated in psychology. I started the business program, and I might get kicked out for saying this, but at the time when I did it, I felt like what I was learning was a little bit behind what I was already experiencing and what I was doing. So at that point, I was already a couple of years into one of my first ventures. And there's really no better education than getting in and just going and doing and creating. And so there were some amazing things that when I took another class, and again, I understand this is different or unique for everybody, but I took some psychology classes and I really liked it. And what stood out to me, and I've started to see more and more in the business program, is to understand and really know why people make the decisions that they do. So as an entrepreneur, there's nothing better than being able to understand why your employees do what they do or say what they do, what motivates them, what keeps them going. It's an amazing skill set to understand your customers, what makes them want to buy, why are they going to go with you versus the competitor, and those are some of the things that I would really recommend you guys as you start to look out and venture into the entrepreneurship field is look at the person side of business. Try and understand the employee, understand the investor, understand the customer, and it will give you a really good understanding of how you should attack or approach that situation. So, I am currently right now, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about some of my current ventures and some of my background, but I'm going to go a little bit more into that tactical that I spoke of. So right now I am the president of a company called Outbox Systems. Outbox Systems, you're really not going to hear about us, and for the most part, the only time you are is if you're going to go on a job board and look for us, or if you're working with one of our partners. So Outbox Systems is integration platform as a service. So I'm sure everybody's heard of the SaaS industry. It's really popular. It's kind of a buzzword right now, but specifically what Outbox does is we connect SaaS platforms. So you're familiar with a lot of local companies, Inside Sales, Qualtrics, Domo. These are all SaaS-based companies that we provide integrations and consulting for. So this is my latest venture, and it's actually been, it's been a blast. It's been a huge education, but it's been a very big change or shift from some of my previous ventures. I actually started my first business. It was called Eco Sales and Marketing. And Eco Sales and Marketing I started when I was going to school at nights. And what basically led me into that, and to kind of back up a little bit, I started becoming or wanting to become an entrepreneur because I had a little chip on my shoulder. And usually they tell you that that's not really a good motivation. For me it was. For me it was a really helpful thing to just kind of boot me out, get me out of my comfort zone. So what happened was I worked for a company, I won't name the name, but I worked for this company and I worked for them for about 2 years. And they were a startup and it was an awesome education. I got to learn a lot of the day-to-day expectations and how to set up a business. And I formed a good portion of their sales and helped them kind of get things started here locally in Utah. And by the time I left, we were I think it was the 9th fastest growing company in Utah. We'd grown 800% year over year, had an amazing experience, but they had actually taken funding. And I went into a meeting after they had just had a board meeting. And on the wall, they had a projector that was thrown up on it. And I wouldn't call it an excuse slide, but essentially the slide was a list of reasons why they hadn't hit the numbers that they had set out to hit. And it told me 2 things. One was their expectations weren't in line with what they had told the management or everybody else, but there was a single bullet point that said, and I remember it to this day, young, mid-level, inexperienced management. And I saw that, and I looked at it, and I said, is that how they perceive me? I'm a young kid, I get it. I haven't been in the industry 20 years. Is that how they perceive me? And I remember talking with them, and I said, is that bullet point, are you talking about me? Because obviously you guys are older. Am I that young, mid-level, inexperienced management? And they said, yes, we're sorry we had to put that on there, but we needed a reason. We needed to give them something why we weren't hitting our numbers. And I said, well, I thought we were hitting our numbers. You didn't clarify that to me. And 2, I stepped away and I said, if I'm in an environment where that's my perception or people's perception of me, I need to get out of it. That's not an environment where I felt like I would continue to grow or that I would become the scapegoat. So that's kind of what pushed me out of the comfort zone. Prior to that, I was really comfortable. I made good money. I loved my job. But I knew in order for me to go where I wanted to go, to really appreciate what I did every day, day in and day out, I had to do it on my own. So that's what kicked me into entrepreneurship. So I started a company, Eco Sales and Marketing, and again, I'll just gloss over these really quickly, but Eco Sales and Marketing, what essentially we did is we partnered with a lot of construction companies across the West Coast. And what I found was that it was a very old, outdated industry that, for whatever reason, they hadn't really kept up with the times in terms of marketing and sales. And I'd been doing these marketing sales for a tech company for a couple of years. And I was shocked how they had their brand on their website. And I was shocked how people would sell their services. And so I approached a couple companies and I said, I have a company, we'll provide you with all the sales and marketing. We'll leverage your company, your brand name. We'll leverage your insurance, your fulfillment. Just let us be your sales and marketing arm. And little did I know, this actually picked up really quickly. So what I loved about Eco Sales and Marketing and a kind of a nugget that I got from it that was completely unexpected was it was an amazing opportunity, very low barrier of entry, really quickly to get into, but it was a great opportunity for me just to get in and taste what entrepreneurship was all about. I think way too often when I talk to students and other entrepreneurs, they talk about the next Apple. They talk about the next Facebook, which is great, and I think that is an amazing thing to have those goals and set out, but every once in a while, it's really good just to nail down and understand a basic business principle. Go out there and execute it for a year or 2. Go make a business profitable. Start something that has a really low barrier to entry, something where you don't have to get angel investors or VC funding, something where you don't have to go get a patent. Find an area where maybe you're passionate, that you understand better than another industry. And the nice thing is there's a huge shift right now where people like you understand marketing and sales and the internet and how to leverage it way better than other industries or other, I guess, times or groups of people. So Eco Sales and Marketing was that thing for me that I came in, There were some amazing rebates and programs that I rode the wave on, and I had a blast. It was something that I learned how to set up a basic pro forma, how to forecast, how to set up a business, what the taxes looked like, how to manage 1099 and contractors, everything from the ground up. It taught me some real lessons. Sales solves all problems. That was one of the most. But for the most part, it was just a great opportunity for me to really sink in my teeth, learn some of the basics of business, and then take those lessons and move them into my next phase. And I always knew that EcoSales, it wasn't going to become that next billion-dollar business, but it cash flowed, and it cash flowed really well. It was healthy. And it was only within probably 2 months after I'd left my previous job that I was making as much or more doing what I loved and actually creating something on my own. So that was a great experience with EcoSales and marketing. From EcoSales and marketing, I took a bit of a shift. My experience with marketing and sales, specifically with online lead generation, that's something that we did for these construction companies. Is we helped through SEO, PPC, and a couple other online processes to generate lead flow. So I was approached by my brother actually at that point, who was starting his next business, and he asked me to come help run the marketing. So I took my experience from this previous company, came into PC Care support at that time, and I was able to take some of these just basic things that I had learned and I taught myself and put them into play and into practice with PC Care support. How many of you guys, just out of curiosity, this is kind of off the table, but how many of you guys have ever worked in or used personally Google AdWords? Anyone? Okay. You may not need to become an expert, but if you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's an amazing thing just to wrap your head around, understanding how paid advertising works on Google. I know that sounds really basic. The reality, though, is a lot of people don't truly understand the difference between the paid ads, local ads, the organic ads, or not ads, but organic search results. That's just basic stuff that if you're going to start your own business, I would highly suggest that you just dip your feet in, start to look at it and understand it. The more you can, though, you can generate all the sales and marketing for whatever channel you're looking to create pretty quickly. It can become very expensive, though. So PC Care support was kind of a step up from EcoSales and marketing. It was a more structured business. There was a lot more details, ins and outs of it. There was a lot more requirements. So we provided all the fulfillment. We did remote IT support. So I'm sure you guys have probably had a computer problem. Your computer breaks down, you get a virus, your email doesn't work. We would connect to customers' computers and we would resolve or fix their problem via the internet. And the way that we were able to do that essentially was build some relationships and channel through online lead gen and create opportunities really quickly and then fulfill it. So PC Care support was a great opportunity. We actually grew that company to about, when we left, was just over 100 employees. It was an Inc. 500 company. We'd won Best in State. It was an amazing experience. We actually sold it to Upship Capital. And it was a great taste, again, of just showing what that hard work and effort went into. What I want to make sure and not gloss over here is those 2.5, 3 years were hell. Didn't take a paycheck for those 3 years. That's something that not many people are willing to do. That is something, though, that I was willing to do and a couple other people because we believed in what we wanted to accomplish and we were more interested in growing and building and scaling our business than padding our bank accounts. And something that oftentimes I see that's the biggest hurdle for entrepreneurs to get them and push them out is they have that dependency or reliancy on, I got to make what I made doing summer sales. I got to make what I made doing this. And the reality is, you're probably not going to for quite some time. Usually they say give yourself at least 6 months before you really should ever expect taking a paycheck from your business. I wouldn't always suggest that you go 3 years. That's not an example I'm saying that you should do. But what I can say is it taught me some real lessons about putting aside my priorities and the things that I wanted to do and executing and making my business as successful as I did and I wanted it to be. There were some very real scares. I can tell you there was a handful of times that probably I was up all night wondering if the business was going to make payroll the next day. There was a couple times, experiences with employees going rogue and content and information being stolen. I mean, I feel like it was a major education for me just to learn and really take a lot of punches in business and say, what can you throw at me? What can I take, and how much do I really want to do this? So PC Care Support, what was nice about it was we used Salesforce. Has anyone here in the room used or familiar with Salesforce? One? Okay, again, if you have any time or desire to go into the tech industry on any level, you're going to come across Salesforce. Salesforce is an amazing CRM, customer relationship management platform. It allows you to manage your customers' contact information. It manages the lead inbound process. It manages the sales process. You can basically run your whole business out of it. So Salesforce is something I've used with a couple previous businesses, but what was nice was with PC Care Support, we started to use it, and it was an amazing tool for us, basically because we had direct access and live real-time data about every department in our company. That sounds pretty straightforward. It sounds pretty basic, but to actually find a startup or a young company, a couple years old, that can tell you right on the spot where their department is in terms of profitability, in terms of cash flow, in terms of customer satisfaction, NPS scores, you name it, is really, really hard to find. I am a stickler when it comes to documentation and really having data behind decisions. And so Salesforce was this huge tool that we utilized through this process. And what was nice is that led into our next business, Outbox Systems. So we understood how to leverage Salesforce to a point and to a level that very few other businesses could do. And what we started to notice was a lot of people would come to us and say, hey, you guys use Salesforce, who does that for you? And we said, well, we actually have some internal people that set it up and work with us. And they said, can they help us? And we said, yeah, well, it's not really what we do, but we can help you, we'll try. It got to the point where the word of mouth and the conversations that basically companies around Utah were specifically saying, go talk to PC Care Support. They do computer support, but they also are really good with Salesforce. Talk to them. And it was this real interesting transition where it was kind of this light bulb went off when we said, okay, PC Care Support's great, we're doing fantastic, but there is a huge need in the market for Salesforce. So that's kind of one of these pivotal moments as an entrepreneur and it's really easy, and I can tell you that there was probably 1,000 other times that the light bulb went off and there was another really shiny, cool opportunity that I was looking at, and I said, oh, I want to go after that. And that's kind of the problem as an entrepreneur is you're always looking at businesses. You're always saying, how could we do it better? I could do that better. They need to do that better. And the problem is you can get really distracted, and you can be an incredibly, I don't want to say bad, but unsuccessful entrepreneur because you're just simply too distracted. You're constantly looking at what other people could do better, and sometimes you just have to focus on what you do and do it really well. With that being said, this one stood out, and we knew that there was some feet to it. So Outbox Systems essentially was the brainchild or came out of this opportunity to seize the market. From that, Outbox Systems is actually pivoted. We're a very different company. We still do Salesforce, but for the most part, we build software now. So we actually build applications for Salesforce and for our partners, and we build integrations. So that's just really quickly, and I know I probably could go into a little more detail with each of those ventures. And like I said, I'm sure there's plenty of other people that have 20 or 30 serial ventures that they've started. I've had a blast with these last 3. I have a lot more lessons to learn, and I'm very aware of that. But I've been able to take some of the lessons that I've learned with each business and apply them to the next. And a good example is that what took us 3 years in a run rate with revenue with PC Care Support took us 7 months with Outbox Systems. And we did that because we had learned certain lessons about how to manage, how to partner, how to build our product and everything like that. So what's really nice is as you start to acquire this knowledge, the relationships, the understanding of the industry, you can apply it and really excel other ventures that you go down. Okay, so those are kind of just high level on the last three real key ventures for myself. What I'd like to talk about is the tactical process of holding your team accountable and setting out and planning goals for the company. So there is a methodology called a V2 MOM. Do we have a marker by chance? Probably don't. Okay, I'll pull it up. So V2 MOM stands for vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measurements. Okay? Here's the thing. There's a lot of sales methodology. Perfect, thank you. There's Rockefeller, there's, you name it, there's different programs or thought processes behind how to schedule or plan for your business. But this really rang for me because Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce, he wrote a book called Behind the Cloud. If you haven't read that and you're interested in the tech industry, read it. Behind the Cloud. And in it, he talks about when the very first day when he started the business, he took his team, his executive team, and he pulled them aside and he said, I want us to lay out our vision, our values, our methods, our obstacles, and our measurements for the next 6 months. Okay? 6 months is really important, and I'll explain why here. So 6 months is really important because oftentimes, and I learned this when I was in business school, build your pro forma, build your your forecast and your business program or your business idea and structure it, which is all fantastic, which is great. But things shift and adapt really quickly, especially in the tech industry, especially in the high-tech industry. Now, if you're going to start a accounting firm or you're going to start a dry cleaning business, you probably can forecast a little bit further. You have history, you have data, you've got experience. In our industry with tech, it moves really fast. And so if you are the type of person that plans out the next 5 years what your business is going to do, there's a really good chance going into month 3, it's going to be a waste. The data will be tossed out. And that was a lesson I learned too, because with EcoSales, I forecasted out 3 years. I did an awesome pro forma and did all the methods and built it all in Excel. And it was really quickly that was tossed out the window. So along those lines, something that I find really interesting, and when I interview people with Outbox Systems, they'll ask, where are you guys going to be in 5 years? Which is a good question to ask for most businesses. For a startup, though, I kind of chuckle because my response to that is usually, I don't know. I have no clue. 5 years ago, our business probably wouldn't have existed, and there probably really wouldn't have been a market for SaaS integrations in Utah County. We weren't at that point. There wasn't the need. So where I live and where specifically as the president of the company, my objective day to day is to help my executive team execute their V2 MOM over the next 6 months. That's what I own. Ryan, who is the CEO, he's focused on the long-term vision of the company, which is incredibly important. Understanding what your exit plan is. What does your funding path look like? Series A, Series B, what are the steps that you need to take to really be ahead of the curve? But for myself, the V2 MOM is paramount to our success. And Mark Benioff actually says in Behind the Cloud, he says that essentially the thing that he feels like that no one asks enough why they're successful is because of this V2 MOM structure. So let me pull up the actual first V2 MOM that you can see that Salesforce or Mark Benioff started. Hold on one second. And before I go into this actually, just to be clear, everybody kind of has their own take on the V2 MOM. There's a lot of different versions and ways to look at it. I'm going to talk to you about what I've found. I've done it, probably 20 times, 10, 15 times probably, and I've learned some good lessons and things that I like to apply, and so I'm going to talk specifically about what I learned there. So you'll see it shift. There's a couple basic rules or priorities when it comes to doing a V2 MOM. At the top of the list is the V2 MOM. You take your team and you go off-site. It's important that you get out of the business or out of that location. My first V2 Mom was at a Barnes & Noble with 3 other people writing on a napkin. You got to get out of your environment, and you got to be somewhere where you can kind of open up and think clearly. It can be really fun. Our last V2 Mom, we went and we drove Mustangs at the Speedway. This last one, we went paintballing. We've gone up 4-wheeling in the canyons. We've done some things just to kind of get yourself out of the day-to-day grind and start to think about, what do I want to accomplish over the next 6 months? Some of the rules or things I would say I would recommend is it's really easy to get distracted, so put aside your phones, put aside your computers when you do your V2 Mom, and just focus 100% on that environment and the questions that you need to accomplish. There's nothing more important in that day with your business than executing the V2 Mom. If you come out of that V2 Mom with a half-written, mixed jumble of ideas and theories, it's not going to do you any good. It will actually hurt you more. So, this is their first V2 Mom. What you can tell and what I love about it is this fits on one page. This isn't a 17-page lecture. This isn't a huge thing that goes over every possible in and out of the business. This just states very clearly, really quickly, 1, my vision. What do I want to accomplish with the business in the next 6 months? So the question that you should ask there is, what do I want to do in the next 6 months with my business? It's a great lesson or a great tool to use. Even if you don't have a business, you don't have a name, you don't have a product, do a V2 Mom. Just start going over it. Even if that employee doesn't exist and it's just you, this is a great place to start. So what do I want to do in the next 6 months? That's the first question you ask yourself. Next question you want to ask yourself is, what is important to me as I pursue my vision? So our values. What is important to me as I create this company that I want to hold myself and my team accountable to? I read an article a couple weeks ago. It talked about culture. Culture is really important. It's a real buzzword. It's really cool. People talk about culture quite a bit. And the thing that this article said was, culture, as much as businesses like to put a really cool plaque on that front entrance door that talks about culture and talks about how they want to be that young, fun startup, best way that you can create a culture that you like and that you want to increase or continue is by who you hire, who you fire, and who you promote. That's really what pushes a culture. If you have a dud or you have a lemon, somebody in that business that doesn't believe in your business at that point, you don't have room for that. You don't. Even if they're the most amazing salesperson you've ever worked with and they don't believe in it, don't bother. Don't go there. So values is really important. You can see some of the things that they set out as values: world-class organization, time to market, functional, usability. Really simple, but to the point. I had a hard time when we started doing values. I always laughed because I felt like it was just, I'd been kind of skewed from big businesses where they said, these are our values. You know, Enron, you know what Enron had as their 2 values? Integrity and honesty. Those were their values. Okay? If you're not familiar with Enron here. Yeah, they weren't honest or had any integrity. So I kind of had this perception like everybody says these things, and so more and more my understanding and the value of setting values from the very beginning has become really important. And that's something that we make very clear to our team and our company. These are the things that we hold our team accountable to and what we want them to do. Methods. Methods is really where it gets into the meat. Methods is where you don't spare yourself ambiguity and you don't make things up. This is where you say exactly what you want to accomplish and how you accomplish it. So the question that they usually recommend at this point is, what am I going to do to accomplish my vision? So that's how you back into that. What are the steps that I'm going to do to accomplish my vision? He says, I'm going to hire a team, finalize the product, rapidly develop the product, build partnerships, build a launch plan, and develop an exit strategy. He's talking about exit strategy, and he's got 2 employees. That's forward thinking. That's awesome. That's really, just be honest, be clear, and say what you want to accomplish. Okay, methods. Obstacles. Obstacles is where you got to be brutally honest with yourself. Obstacles is where it doesn't hurt or it doesn't help you at all to lie to yourself and say, we've got everything we need. Be honest. Be clear. Tell people what those true obstacles are that will hold you back from accomplishing that vision. So the question is, what is the biggest challenge that I face over the next 6 months? Again, go back to 6 months. Think in that time frame. It's hard to think outside, or it's easy to think outside that. So go back to the 6 months. He says developers, product manager, business development person. These are key things that are holding him back from being successful. And then lastly, measurements. So measurements is my personal favorite. And I'll tell you why. Go ahead and pull this up. Measurements I love because there's no way of getting around a measurement. It's black and white. The question that you ask on measurements, and that is the best way to dictate the success that you had, is how will I know I'm successful? That's the answers that you need to question, or the questions you need to answer on the measurements. That might mean, like he says right here, we're all rich. That's a measurement to him. I personally love measurements, and to take his method a little bit further, I like to have very clear metrics and numbers. No gray area. If you go into a measurement at the end of the 6 months and you're sitting down with your colleague and you're saying, well, did you successfully execute your measurements? And they say, yeah, I did. And the measurement says, get lead flow going. Well, I got it going. Okay. Well, but you got like 10 leads. That's not really what we were expecting. We need it substantial. So what I would recommend as you work with your team and you set out these goals, have clear, defined measurements. Quarter-over-quarter growth, month-over-month growth, percentages, numbers, things that you can hold yourself accountable to. Things that you can go back to the table and say, we said we were going to generate 465 opportunities in the last 6 months. We generated 475. We are successful. We did what we said and we executed. So this process of the V2 Mom has been essential and has been so important to my process, and I think a lot of the experience and success that we've been able to participate in because of this. So this last week I've actually been doing my company's V2 Mom. I'm going to be presenting my company's V2 Mom in our company meeting tomorrow. I want to just share with you a couple quick things about the lessons I've learned, some of the things I really like about the V2 Mom, and some of the things that are usually done very poorly. So the number one thing that the V2 Mom does is it creates transparency across the whole company. Just curious, have any of you, and I guess you don't need to raise your hands, but I'm assuming most of you have had experiences where you've worked for a business and you can tell that the objectives and goals of the owner or your manager is completely out of line with yours. You can tell we're not on the same page. I had that experience with a business where I went into a meeting with the owners and they were talking about, why aren't we selling more ARR, annual recurring revenue? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, we're really poorly selling our ARR packages. Why is that? And I said, well, I didn't know that you wanted us to sell that. That wasn't a priority. No one had talked to me about this. I didn't know that that was a focus for the company. And so I immediately realized really quickly there was a huge gap between what the owners, the investors, the board had and what the day-to-day executioners, the people on the floor were doing. And so what I love about the V2 Mom is that it opens everything up. When I present it to my company, I have everybody there from the ground up. They see it. They know exactly what me as the owner and founder with a couple other individuals are holding ourselves accountable to at the end of those 6 months. And there's never a question of what's your priority, what are you focused on, and what do you want to do. So transparency across the board is something I love. Pitfall that I usually see, and I just mentioned this earlier, is poorly defined measurements. Ambiguous, not clear, that can hurt you, and it can hurt you really bad. Another thing I really like, and I'm going kind of quickly here, I've got a lot of thoughts around the V2 Mom, is I love how quickly it allows you to shift and adapt as a company. 6 months might sound like a really short period of time, but you'd be blown away how quickly it goes and how quick your business will change and adapt. So I can tell you, when I was preparing for this, I looked at my company's last 2 V2 Moms, and I kind of had to laugh because I felt we're a completely different company. Our measurements, our focus have changed and shifted, but that's okay. We've pivoted. We've been very fluid in terms of shifting and going where we need to as a business to grow and succeed. And sometimes it's really easy, especially I've seen some businesses, amazing businesses, die on the vine because they don't want to shift, because they just go, this is what we said we're going to do. We're going to do this. And despite the conversations of saying, you do that, maybe that is what you do right now, but this is where the market's going. It's shifting. You need to adapt. You need to change. They hold tight to those things that they have, and they die or they wither away. Not always, but I've seen that happen quite a few times. Another obstacle that I see typically is, or an issue that I see is obstacles that are listed should always have a method to resolve them. So if you have an issue and a problem with developers, there should be a method to hire developers, get a recruiting firm, whatever that looks like. You shouldn't ever just throw out those issues and say, well, too bad, we're not going to do it. It sucks, but we'll just see what we can do to hire more people. You have to have a clear method to accomplish it. And the last thing that I absolutely love about the V2 Mom, and I'll wrap up, is the V2 Mom allows me to provide and have clear accountability to every person in my company. So here's how it works. The company creates a V2 Mom. The V2 Mom is then shared with the company, and then the managers create a V2 Mom. They'll create one for their department. And they'll say, I want to accomplish this in the next 6 months that feeds into the company. And then every individual employee in the company will create their own V2 Mom. So as you start to see, everything funnels into that company main V2 Mom structure. Everybody is on the same page. And what's nice about that is, as an employee, you often ask yourself, you're like, do they value me? Am I doing what they want them to do or what they want me to do? And what this allows is very clear expectations of, if you're not doing these measurements, then yeah, you need to get back to what we talked about. But if I wish I had a copy of our last V2 Mom, I would have brought it in. But on the back side of it, you'll see I have the signature from every employee on our company. List of all the signatures, everybody saying, we're going to do this, we're going to execute our V2 Mom over the next 6 months. And for me, I love that because it provides a just 100% clear expectations across the board of what we're going to do in the next 6 months. So hopefully that gave you guys a relatively good idea of what the V2 Mom structure looks like, a little bit more of the tactical behind the scenes side of business and managing a growing startup. Like I said, it's fluid. It changes. If you have a better way to do it, do it. Take it, run with it. This is just some of the things I've learned and I've applied that have really helped me in my experience. I also I'd extend an invitation that if anyone would like to attend our company V2 Mom, you're more than welcome to. Like I said, it's short notice, but I'll be presenting it to our company. We have offices in Jordan Commons. You feel free to reach out to me, but if you'd like to sit in and see what a company V2 Mom looks like, how it's presented and what it does and how the company receives or responds to it, you're more than welcome to join. So with that, Shauna, I don't know if you want, we can open up questions or if there's any other detail I can ask. Is that okay?
So to clarify, something incredible information. You're presenting tomorrow on your
Yes. Yes, so I'll be presenting with our company. We just moved to Sandy, and I have a new address I can share with you, Shauna. But you're more than welcome to join.
So I work with a lot of startups, and I usually tell them the same thing, to not to get paycheck for a while. And then they ask me how, and I never really have a good answer for them. What would be your answer in that situation?
I can tell you what I did. I had to sacrifice a lot. I had to put a lot of things on hold. I actually moved into my parents' house. That's a real crappy thing to do in your 20s. And I'm sure probably a lot of you already are, and it's reality. We can all admit that. But I knew I wanted to make this business successful. I knew where my priority was. So a lot of times it comes down to really tough decisions and just saying, what do you need? What do you want? What are you willing to put on hold? Do you have options? Do you have people that you can leverage? My wife at the time, fortunately, she had just graduated, and so she was able to work and provide part-time for us, and so that was a huge help. My wife being essentially the investor, as you could say, in our business, essentially. So it's kind of flipping it on its head. Rather than us bringing money to the table and being an investor for the business, we said in lieu of that, we will take or drop our pay in order to fund the company. My thought or my theory behind that has evolved some bit, and without going into too much detail, you can actually have some serious tax credits as a business owner when you provide loans to the business rather than taking less pay. And so there's some actually balance between that. But for me at that time, it made sense. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it just comes down to making tough decisions. So what else?
You mentioned that as an entrepreneur, you are constantly looking at different businesses and seeing that things could be done better. And how you mentioned how you might have been business out, you thought something was viable, something was rock.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep yourself grounded if you're always seeing opportunity after that?
So after a certain period of time, you start to become familiar with some of the obstacles or issues. So the reality of starting a business sometimes is a lot bigger than most people think. Like I said, when they think about starting the next Facebook and they say they can do it better, that takes millions and millions of dollars of investment. You've got to bring in a VC. You need to, whether you need to get a patent for a product or something. What I think is the best way for you to really decide what is the next venture and how you want to proceed is to really evaluate that opportunity and say, okay, how quickly can I go to market? What's the cost for me to create this? Do I have the resources? Am I passionate about it? Is it something I am interested in? That's, I think, a kind of a reality of an entrepreneur is you're constantly getting hit with those things. But the point, or I guess what I'm getting to is I set up a couple key things that I said, if I see an opportunity that has these milestones or these signals, I'll give it a further thought. And the next step that I did is I actually went to another individual and I said, hey, let's test it out. And something that, as a quick thought, a lot of people have this idea like, I can't do a business until I've got a business name, I've got a company, I've got everything set up, I've got employees, we've got our shirt. When I started Eco Sales and Marketing, I didn't even have our business set up. I went and got our contractor shirt and went knocking doors and created the business. Get out there and see what the need is. Test it out. You don't have to. The internet's amazing right now that you can create a business really quickly and cheaply, and you don't have to invest $20,000 before you go knock on a door or talk to a person or see if the market has the need. So hopefully that, I don't know if that gives you a little bit more detail behind that. Matt.
When you create these companies V2 models,
Mm-hmm.
do you go and review the department's V2 model, or does the department go and review the individual employee's V2 model?
Good question. So part of it that I didn't mention, and I'm glad you bring up, is we review the previous V2 MOM every 6 months. So before we start our new one, we go back to the team and say, what did we accomplish? What can we do better? We set out the V2 MOM with the company, and then the managers create their V2 MOM. They work with their team, and then the managers will come back to me, and I'll hold them accountable, and I'll review it with them. And then the managers work with the employees to do the same thing. They'll review it with the employee, they'll hold them accountable to it. So it's kind of that trickle down of making sure that everybody knows where they stand. Does that help? Okay, cool.
In your early days, how much were you spending on AdWords per month, and how much were you spending on Salesforce?
Good question. Salesforce isn't cheap. Salesforce is expensive. So I would suggest there's some other solutions out there. Podio. There's some other CRMs that are better for startups that are a little bit more affordable. It's only a matter of time, and I'm a little biased here, obviously because I partner with Salesforce, but it's only a matter of time before you got to bite the bullet and do it, because it provides the platform for you to scale and to basically compete with the Fortune 500 companies as a person with 6 employees. So it's very expensive, but I would question at what point you are in your business, when you need that data, and when you're really ready to take that on. AdWords can be really expensive really quickly. If you don't know what you're doing, you can go out and say, I'm gonna put a budget on it for $500, and I want every time somebody searches the words Salesforce Utah for my ad to come up. And what you won't, if you don't do your work or your background check, you could have that budget go like that. 30 minutes, you have 100 clicks, and it's gone, and nobody's a customer. So what's important there is I usually recommend to do some serious research, keyword analysis, make sure you know what market you want to go after, and set small budgets and grow into it. So this scale, I started spending probably couple $1,000s in AdWords, and probably by the end of it, with a couple businesses, we were managing a couple $100,000 in spend. So it scales as long as you can see the ROI, as long as you can see the multiple, and you can say for every dollar I put into this keyword, I get 3x out of it. That's a no-brainer. It's just a cash flow game at that point. How quickly can I get the funds in to execute that? So it depends on the industry, and some, if you're familiar at all, cost per click, you can be paying $15 for somebody to click on something, and in a whole different industry, you could be paying 15 cents. So you got to do your homework there, or otherwise you can waste a lot of money. Good question. Any other questions? Stumped everybody? Where did I put my water? We good? We good? Okay.
So you talked about the importance of a good team, how if somebody's bringing that team down, let them go or whatever. So how do you establish the best team, or in your opinion, what is I mean, because sometimes you can have a great interview, but you can't really get to know somebody in an interview so much. So how do you weed out the bad people with stars, but then
So I interview people a little bit differently. If you probably talk to anyone that's interviewed with me, I hate the standard, the questions like, what about you? What's the most thing that holds you back, or what's your biggest weakness? I work too hard. Oh, that's not a weakness. That's your way of copying the question. The real thing for me when it comes to the interviews is getting to know the individual as much as possible and thinking about, do I want to work with this person? He's going to be sitting next to me for the next 6 months. Do I want to work with him? The real answer to that is really tough because you sometimes really do have to make a gamble on the individual. But I've personally, especially with smaller teams, I've brought in people that I've either had that other people can vouch for, or that I have outside relationships with. You have to be careful there too. But if there's somebody that you're bringing on in a real key title or position, talk to the other people they've worked with. See if there's other people that can talk to you about their experience or kind of their skill set. But the lesson I learned, and I had some really bad hires at early stages of our company because the person was so damn good at what they did. They were amazing at sales, or they were an amazing developer, or they were an amazing marketer. And what I quickly found out was that really, as much as that's great, if you hate working with them and you feel like they're bringing the company down and they're constantly talking about, well, I don't think that's a really good idea, it's not worth it. It's better to bring in somebody that is maybe a little more scrappy, that probably doesn't have that much experience, and that's the reality of a bootstrapped company. You can't hire in, your mid-level executives. You can't hire in these higher people with more experience, so you kind of have to take the gamble, but make sure it's with somebody that you actually see yourself enjoying your workday and spending time with, because chances are you'll spend more time with them than you will with your significant other. And that sucks sometimes. Dallin.
How much is knowing the right people have in the pipeline?
Huge. So there's an article that my brother wrote in Forbes about relationship capital. If you get a chance, I'd check that out. Relationship capital is a huge, huge piece to, I think, entrepreneur success. And that is as you start to build the relationships with your businesses, what's nice is right now, in my point, I have somebody that I can call and within 5 minutes have legal advice and help immediately from a trusted, knowledgeable source. I can call somebody and have a website built and designed in a very short period of time because of the relationships I've built and the trust and the type of people that know and like to work with me. So we always talk about business school. One of the most important things of going to school is the people around you. And it's very true. A lot of my colleagues and people that I've worked with or done business with are people that I've met at school, people who I've met at other ventures and basically built a relationship with and grown or done other things with. The thing you have to be careful there, though, is if you hire a friend, family member, it can backfire really quickly because it puts a lot of pressure on relationships, especially if it's not going well. And even on the flip side, if it is doing well, it can have the exact same problem because then they think, I deserve more or I want more pay. So, great question.
All right, so we're going to wrap up, but remember, there's one space open for lunch today in SD 214. So you can come to that, and also we've got about 10 minutes between now and when we've got to go to lunch, so you can come and talk
Cool.
more to
Thank you.